So the history of tap dance has been written as an African and Irish exchange of Irish indentured servants and enslaved West Africans in the Caribbean in the 1600s. And at the same time came the slave ships that brought enslaved West Africans into the Caribbean. This was in the 1600s. Been written, has been through 300 years, right? Between the Irish jig and the West African step dances called jube. There was this exchange. These forms were not only into the southern United States, like in the Carolinas, but also in the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, it was in Puerto Rico, it was in Cuba, it was in Haiti, it was in Martinique. These forms were really taking place there. And also in Montserrat, on the island of Montserrat, that was a distinctive Afro-Irish settlement. There were particularly many Irish and West Africans came together in islands of the Lesser Caribbean. Yes, so that's the history that has been written. It was 300 years long, right? And so through that history, we have this is tap dance was beginning. It was the beginning of tap dance. And that was in the Caribbean and also in the United States, particularly the southern United States. By the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, there had developed two streams, two styles of tap dance. One style, which was very influenced by the Irish, is what we see today in white theater on Broadway. The second stream was what I call the Black rhythm sensibility stream, that is really extreme, based in African rhythm and African sensibilities. And so the history that I'm going to speak of today is the history of Black rhythm tap. This is not the tap dancing of Fred Astaire or Ginger Rogers. This is a style of tap dance that anyone in your festival, this stream, is doing today. The Black rhythm tap tradition. This is a style or a tradition of Black rhythm tap, which began on the plantations in the southern United States, when white masters, plantation owners, put their slaves up to do jigging competitions. When these Black jigging competitions were looked on by the white plantation owners as entertainment. Ooh, yay! However, the West African peoples who were enslaved doing this jigging, it was not for entertainment. It was for survival. This was because they needed to hold on to their African culture of song, dance, and storytelling through the language of the drum.
Au travers du langage des percussions.
So, this history that I'm going to tell you about is about spirituality. It's a spiritual practice. It's a history of resistance. It's a protest expression. It's a freedom struggle, a struggle for freedom through the language of the drum. So I'm saying that Black rhythm tap is a century-long freedom expression, a century-long freedom expression that today is very much very much aligned with the Black Lives Matter movement because it resists white supremacy culture. It resists it. It fights against it. And it's an antidote to anti-Blackness. So this is really my thesis. This is the history. And I'm saying that when you see Frédéric's dancing, when you see Jérémy's dancing, when you see the number of young Black rhythm tap dancers in the United States, this is a spiritual practice. It's very serious. It is not about entertaining. Okay, so let's go with we're going to listen to the talking drum and the language of the drum so that you can hear in this first clip the tap dancing that comes from the drum. So this is the first clip, number 1. The drum has a language, just like tap dance. When you're improvising, that is a language as well. It is a drum language that communicates. And so on the plantation in the 1700s, slaves, Black slaves from Africa, were communicating through the drum. If there was a Black slave who was escaping the plantation and going away, the other plantation would hear this and say, "Ah, he's coming, beware, look for him." And so this contributed to the slave uprisings. This was a way that slaves could escape. Of course, white plantation owners got very angry. And so they passed, in the 1740s, they passed something called the slave laws. They prohibited the beating of the drums. They said, you cannot use the drum. So what are you going to do if your language of communicating is the drum? So there became, of course, this is also to survive, there became substitutions for the drum. Clapping, jawboning. There was a way of plaking drums. It was called jawboning, was another kind. Stamping the feet, playing the body with juba, playing the body. All ways to play the drum. And so there developed different kinds of footwork, right? Different kinds of ways to play the drum with the feet. And so by 1800, this was before minstrelsy, right? Which is a whole other thing. By 1800, there developed a style of dancing called black jigging, black jigging. So this is what it looked like. We're going to look at now, in 1897, we're going to look at the first filming, one of the first filming of jig dancing It's a film called Dancing Darky Boy. I'm sorry for the name. But we'll take a look at this form of jigging. Yes. So thank you. So let me talk about this a little bit. So you look at this, right? This was shot in 1897, the very, very first cameras that we had. Although this style of jigging began in the 1800s. So let's look at this, right? We have a young Black boy, 10 years old. You can see that his style of dancing is flat-footed. This was the early style. You can see, can you see this early style of tap dancing in his feet? And let me say now that this word tap dance, right? It's not a good name because it was only in the 1930s that metal taps go on the shoes. So we're looking at a style that's flat-footed, that's in flat shoes, and that starts from African barefoot dancing. What's also important about this clip is that there were all white men behind this young dancer, and they're clapping. This is also part of early tap dancing. There's going to be a clapping accompaniment. There's dancing and there's the clapping. And that's the African drum. When you have African dance, you have the drums and you have the dancer, right? So here we have, again, to make this connection, you have the dancer and the clapping is the accompaniment. There's also very important also that I must point out is that these are white men clapping for a young Black dancer, a boy. And so you have the beginnings, right, of this love, right? This love and this theft of Black dancing, this fascination. I think that's the word, fascination. Fascination, right? Right, it's very similar when Josephine Baker comes to Paris in 1921. It's this love of the negra, right? It's the love of Blackness. It's the fascination with Blackness. This eventually becomes called appropriation. Appropriation. Okay, so that's the beginning, right? Here we go. Already by 1900, we have an African-based form of dancing, tap dance, that is definitely in the Black rhythm tradition, but it's looked on from white culture as being an entertainment, but it's not. And so we're going to look now at the very first filming of, this is what we're going to see. It's called The Pickaninnies. It was, again, turn of the century. It was 1894. It's the very first motion picture camera of, it's called The Pickaninny Dance from the Passing Show. And what we're going to see is this is the first African Americans to appear before a motion picture camera. This is the very first.
Yeah.
Pickaninnies is a derogatory term. Let me explain. Pickaninnies was a term where white vaudeville companies would bring in young black male dancers to make the show entertaining.
Donc en
They
fait,
were called pickaninnies. They were young, just like the boy that we saw, Dancing Darky Boy. Often in the United States, when we show this clip, although people don't show it, but when we show it, they just show this clip without mentioning the names of these dancers.
et quand ils montrent cette vidéo aux États-Unis, et c'est rare, ils ne mentionnent même pas les noms, les prénoms des danseurs.
So I want to give you their names. This is Joe Rastus, Denny Tolliver, and Walter Wilkins. And they are dancing a jig and a breakdown. So let's take a look. This is early tap dance. And if you can see, it looks very much like breakdancing, doesn't it? This is 1894. When we look at it again, look at the steps. You've got all of these early steps, early tap steps.
C'est vraiment les débuts.
You've got flaps. They're doing time steps. They're accompanying with the harmonica, and they're doing
Ils accompagnent avec l'harmonica.
Now, this tradition that we see in this dance is a tradition that continues into the 20th century and today. If you can see, one goes into the circle. So we're talking about the African circle, right? The tradition, as you can see, they have formed a circle, a semicircle. Yes. And one person goes into the center of the circle, and then he leaves the circle, and another person comes in. So this is a tradition, even though it was a closed circle. When we start to perform it, the circle opens up so that we can see, but it's still the circle dance. It's the African circle dance. And this is a tradition of tap dancing that happens today. And so we're going to see an example of this in 1989 from the Broadway musical Black and Blue. Now, this is the opening, is called Hoofers a Cappella. You're going to see all the things that you saw in the Pickaninnies. Clapping. The back line is going to be a-ya, a-ya, a-ya. So there's accompanying the dance. As one by one, each dancer goes into the circle to do their solo. Watch now in this clip, everybody's style of rhythm tap dance is different, but still, it is still in the Black rhythm tap tradition. You're going to see Bunny Briggs, Eugene Fleming, Jimmy Slide, Lon Chaney, Bernard Manners, George Hillman, and Ralph Brown. can at least to one of the early performances of tap, jazz rhythm, black rhythm tap that was performed. It was really done like about 1914, but we're going to see a performance of it in 1932. It was performed by Bill Bojangles Robinson. Well, the stair dance, this is called the stair dance. That stair dance was really choreographed, created in 1914. Right, it was in the film, I think Harlem is Heaven was the name of the film. What I want to say about it, however, is first of all, Bill Robinson is one of our legendary ancestors of the tap dance. And he was born in 1878. And when people look at this, people have written, oh, look at how much the Irish tradition is in his dancing, because he's dancing upright with most of the rhythms from below the knee. And he's dancing in tap shoes that were split-soled clogs, which was from the Irish tradition. It was a shoe that was split at the ball so that you could dance on the balls of your feet. However, even though he came out of that Irish tap influence tradition, even though he is syncopating his rhythms. Also, he's dancing up and down these stairs. However, he's also dancing on an African instrument called the balafon, which is, if you take these stairs and you put it out here, you have the balafon. That's an African instrument like the xylophone. And so, when you look at the way that and each step that he taps on is a different rhythm. And so, this is an African instrument that he has made into an African-American instrument. So it's very much related to the African instrument called the balafon. Jagles Robinson. So I'm going to show one other, this was filmed in 1932. So we're really in the decade of the 1930s. When we have in jazz, right, this form of tap dancing was called rhythm tap, but it was also called jazz tap. That was because it was performed to jazz music. And it's in the decade of the 30s when jazz swing was very, very important and popular. And this was a decade in which tap dance flourished as an entertainment. So I'm going to show you, I haven't shown you any women dancers yet. I wrote Tap Dancing America because I wanted to write in the history of women in tap. Not only the women who are in the chorus lines, but also the Black women soloists, very rare. And so we're going to look at my favorite dancer in the 1930s. Her name is Cora La Red. She is performing, it's in the film That's the Spirit, I have it, but the name of this is called Jig Time. And it really swings. It swings.
Love jig time, got to have jig time. Please give me all jig time, all the rest of my days. Oh, first you get low down, get hot and go to town. Keep going, don't slow down. That's the jig time. Break that rhythm, make you sigh like wild, make you cry like a child, make you say, oh, what's done?